In 1945, the Reading Company believed it had found a way to modernize on the cheap. The plan was to rebuild 30 aging steam locomotives into powerful 484 freighters for a fraction of what new diesel locomotives would cost. 40% savings on paper. The board signed off. Within years, that decision had drained the railroad's finances so completely, it helped push an entire company toward bankruptcy. The miscalculation started with a pressure no one at Reading could ignore. Freight surged across the Northeast after the war, and the Reading Company was caught in a race it could not afford to lose. Interstate Commerce Commission reports show freight traffic on the Reading's lines jumped nearly 30% between 1943 and 1947, measured in ton miles. Coal, steel, manufactured goods, everything moved by rail, and the pressure to deliver more faster never let up. Yet while the demand soared, Reading's finances remained tight. Years of deferred maintenance during wartime, coupled with thin margins, left the company short on cash, just as the industry's biggest players started to change direction. Competitors like the Pennsylvania Railroad and New York Central began receiving their first diesel locomotives in 1945. Press releases from the era boasted about the new engine's reliability and the promise of lower operating costs. By 1947, the Pennsylvania Railroad had over 300 diesels in service. New York Central was not far behind. These new machines could run longer between servicing, needed fewer crew members, and sidestepped the constant cycle of coaling, watering, and repairs that defined steam. For Reading's management, the numbers were impossible to ignore. The company needed more horsepower on its busiest lines, but lacked the capital for a wholesale diesel conversion. Every dollar counted. In that climate, any solution that kept trains moving and costs down, even if it meant doubling down on old technology, seemed not just practical, but necessary. The logic was simple. Rebuild what you have, stretch every asset, and hope the future does not come faster than you can afford to meet it. Inside Reading's boardroom, the debate circled around a single urgent problem: how to modernize without the cash reserves of bigger rivals. Meeting minutes from early 1945 lay out the mechanical chief's proposal in blunt terms: rebuild the existing steam fleet into something new, rather than buy diesels outright. The pitch was clear. By converting 30 worn-out 280 consolidations into modern 484 Northerns, Reading could field powerful engines at a fraction of the cost. Draft memos promised a 40% savings compared to diesel purchases, all without the need to overhaul roundhouses or retrain the entire workforce. The project would be done in 12 months, using the railroad's own shops in Reading, Pennsylvania. Executives latched onto the phrase, rebuilt, not built new. It became both a marketing hook and a shield against criticism. The plan promised to stretch every dollar, keep men on the payroll, and deliver the horsepower needed to move mountains of freight. Internal documents reveal a sense of resolve, if not desperation. The board signed off on the budget, authorizing the mechanical department to begin work immediately. On paper, the T1 program looked like a masterstroke, an end run around the diesel revolution, and a way to buy time until finances improved. But the decision locked Reading into steam just as the rest of the industry was walking away. The future had been wagered on a technology already sliding toward obsolescence. In the Reading Company's main shops, the first battered 280 consolidations rolled in for conversion. Each engine arrived with decades of coal country grime baked into its steel. The plan called for a transformation. The old frames would be stretched, new steel welded in place, and a set of four-wheel leading trucks fitted up front, followed by a matching pair at the rear. The result was a 484-wheel arrangement, known to railroaders as Northern, with the muscle to haul heavier loads at higher speeds. Engineering drawings from 1945 show the boiler, salvaged from the donor engines, was enlarged and set higher on the new frame. Fireboxes were rebuilt to handle more heat, and the running gear was upgraded with modern bearings and improved lubrication systems. Shop crews worked around the clock, machining axles and fabricating new side rods to handle the extra power. The T1 locomotives took shape as hybrids, part old iron, part new ambition. Each locomotive was a patchwork of original parts and fresh assemblies, bolted and riveted together with the hope that old steel could match the demands of a post-war freight boom. Yet beneath the clean lines and fresh paint, the design carried the fingerprints of compromise. The frame extensions added weight in places the original engines had never been stressed. The new trucks promised stability at speed, but introduced their own alignment headaches. Every modification was a bet that the past could be re-engineered for the future. On paper, the T1 locomotives looked like a masterstroke of thrift and ingenuity. In practice, the complexity of these conversions would soon reveal itself, not just in the shop, but out on the main line, where every mile would test the wisdom of rebuilding yesterday's machines for tomorrow's race. Reality hit hard the moment the T1s left the shop floor. Daily inspection sheets from Reading's main roundhouse filled up with the same complaints: leaking superheaters, worn bearings, stubborn poppet valves that demanded constant adjustment. Lubrication alone became a ritual. Crews spent hours crawling along the running gear, oiling every joint, every rod, every axle box. Shop foremen, faced with mounting backlogs, juggled work orders for boiler washouts, firebox patching, and the endless grind of ash removal. Oral histories from Reading firemen describe 12-hour shifts that ended with hands blackened by coal dust and uniforms soaked through from water tower spray. One recalled, "If a T1 ran 1,000 miles without a trip to the pit, we called it a miracle." The railroad's infrastructure, so recently seen as an advantage, now acted like an anchor. Every T1 depended on a network of coaling stations, water towers, and roundhouses that needed their own repairs. When a locomotive rolled in, it brought with it a train of support: hostlers, machinists, boilermakers, each essential, each paid from a shrinking budget. Maintenance logs from 1947 show shop-hour backlogs stretching days behind schedule. Engines lined up outside the shop doors, waiting for parts that sometimes had to be custom machined on site. The promise of rebuilt, not built new, faded as the true cost of keeping steam alive became impossible to hide. The T1s demanded everything: time, labor, money, and patience. What began as a clever workaround had become a daily struggle to keep the wheels turning, draining resources that could never be recaptured. While Reading shops strained to keep the T1s rolling, the numbers from dieselized competitors told a different story. Industry surveys from the late 1940s show that new diesel locomotives spent less than 10% of their time sidelined for maintenance, compared to nearly 1/3 for Reading's rebuilt steam. Availability reports from the era reveal a hard truth: diesels could cover 28 or 29 days a month, while a T1 was lucky to see 20 before needing repairs or inspections. Labor studies commissioned by railroad economists projected even starker contrasts, where a diesel required just 2 or 3 crew members and could run for days without intervention. A T1 demanded a team: engineers, firemen, hostler, machinists, each drawing pay, even as the locomotive sat idle. One analysis from 1948 calculated that switching to diesels could have cut Reading's road crew hours by nearly half, freeing up payroll for investment elsewhere. The promise of thrift that drove the T1 program vanished when measured against the relentless efficiency of diesel. The savings on paper were devoured by shop time, overtime, and the endless need for skilled hands. For every day a T1 sat cold in the roundhouse, a diesel rolled past, hauling more freight with fewer men and less fuss. Ledger sheets from 1949 to 1951 tell the story in stark numbers. Maintenance costs for the T1 fleet climbed year after year, outpacing any gains in freight revenue. By 1950, the annual report showed repairs and servicing swallowing nearly a quarter of the company's operating budget, a figure that had doubled in just 5 years. Finance officers flagged the trend in blunt memos, warning that the expense lines tied to steam were rising faster than income from coal and merchandise traffic. Credit agencies took notice. In the spring of 1951, Reading's bond rating was downgraded, citing persistent operating deficits and unsustainable maintenance expenditures. The company's margin for error shrank to almost nothing. Every dollar poured into keeping the T1s running was a dollar not spent on new power or network upgrades. The gamble to stretch old assets had become a drain, locking Reading into a cycle of spending just to stand still. On paper, the T1s were supposed to buy time. In practice, they burned through it, and the cash that came with it, faster than anyone in the boardroom had dared to admit. On paper, the T1 locomotives promised salvation. In reality, they drained resources and locked Reading into yesterday's technology. The true cost was not just money lost, but a strategic misread of the future, one that pulled the railroad closer to collapse. Sometimes progress is knowing when to let go.